So good afternoon to everyone and welcome to today's virtual design review panel meeting. This is the first item on the agenda. I'm Joe Bertoloni, host of this meeting, but panel member David Coluccio will be the chair. In addition to the panel members, we have the applicant team, city staff, members of the public, and the media observing this meeting. Members of the public are welcome to observe the meeting only. This session is being recorded and will be uploaded to the DRP webpage. Just a reminder to please keep your microphones muted if you are not speaking. Thank you. David, please begin the meeting.
Good afternoon, everybody. Joe, can you confirm that the session is being recorded?
It is.
And are there any changes to the agenda today?
There are not, no.
I guess I'm going to ask the panel members if there's any conflicts with this project, and I'll take silence to mean that there is none. Okay, the first item on the agenda today is the review of 405 James Street North. Lead planner on the file is Mark Kelly. Good afternoon, Mark. We're ready for your presentation. Please keep the presentation under 10 minutes.
Hi, good morning. Can everyone see my screen? Joe, we're good?
You're good.
Okay, my name's Mark Kaler. I'm a senior planner on the urban team with the planning division, and I'm the staff member assigned to this file. And I'm just going to bring you through a quick overview of the site and the city's policies that apply to the site.
We're getting some odd background noise. If you're not speaking, can you make sure you're muted?
Okay, sounds like it's quieted. Okay, so we're here to review a proposal for a 450 unit residential development. It consists of 14 3 to 4 story multiple dwellings, stacked townhouses, and 2 7-story multiple dwellings with a minimum of 284 parking spaces in the zoning bylaw, but you'll see they propose a bit more than that, both underground and surface parking spaces as well. There's 211 long-term bicycle parking spaces. So the subject site occupies an entire block in the city's north end, bordered by James Street North to the east, Ferry Street to the north, McNabb to the west, and Strawn to the west. To the south. So you can see surrounding uses. It's in the middle of a kind of lower scale residential neighborhood. You can see Bayfront Park to the west. You have Beneto School and Rec Center to the east, and then to the south there's the West Harbor GO Station, and further south is downtown Hamilton. And they're also very close to the Stewart Street Rail Yard, which is just south of Bayfront Park. And it currently is occupied by former city or Hamilton housing development with townhouse units. So here's a view of the site from Strawn and James looking northwest. You can see the existing buildings. They're now vacant, 2-story townhomes. Here's a similar view from the corner of James and Ferry looking southwest. And from McNabb and Ferry looking southeast. And it's a better view of the townhouses. These are facing Strawn. So like I mentioned, the adjacent neighborhoods generally low rise. This is a view to the east looking up James Street North. You can see some 2-story townhomes. And then north of the site on the other side of Ferry, some detached semi-detached dwellings. Similarly, on the other side of McNabb, detached and semi-detached. And this is a view south of the site. You can see the West Harbor GO Station and then downtown Hamilton further in the distance. So just quickly go through what's being proposed. So there are, as I mentioned, 14 stacked townhouses buildings occupying most of the site, and then you can see the two multiple dwellings, 7 stories, located in the middle of the block facing James Street. Building A is 46 units, a city housing Hamilton building, and then a 117 unit building that's proposed to be affordable housing operated by Indwell. So here's quickly some elevations of the multiple dwelling. On the left is building A, and on the right is building B. And then just some elevations of the stacked townhouses.
Just a sec, Joe, could you mute everybody else but Mark, please?
Yep.
So the existing policy framework, the subject site is within the West Harbor Secondary Plan area, which as of yet has not been incorporated in the Urban Hamilton Official Plan. So the property is still in the former City of Hamilton Official Plan and the Hamilton Wentworth Regional Official Plan. But the most important policies are within the secondary plan. So I'm going to stick to those. And in terms of the overall structure of the secondary plan area, the site is along a corridor of gradual change, which is James Street North. And then the westerly part of the property is within a stable area. And then in terms of land use designations, it's currently designated medium density residential 1. And there's a height schedule that permits a maximum height along James Street of 2 to 4 stories, with the rest of the site being basically the heights are applicable from the designation policies, which I'll get to in a minute. So for stable areas, these are generally lower density neighborhoods that define the character of the West Harbor area. So within these areas, there's not significant physical change that's anticipated. With the predominant form of housing being detached, semi-detached, and street townhouse dwellings, which is reflected of what's there today. Along James Street North, which is a corridor of gradual change, the policies promote positive incremental change to improve the vitality, character, and image of the corridor and improve the pedestrian environment. And along with that, any redevelopment along the corridor should respect the scale and character of existing development within the stable neighborhoods that are adjacent. By providing appropriate transition and heights and massing and screening any parking and loading in service areas. In terms of the designation, the existing designation is medium density residential 1, and this permits multiple dwellings. It has a maximum density of 60 to 150 units per hectare, and building heights in the range of 3 to 5 stories, with again the 2 to 4 stories applying along James Street North. And the design of new developments should have respect for light, views, and privacy of adjacent buildings, and should minimize shadow and wind packs on the public realm. Any amenity spaces should be consolidated to create to be as usable as possible, and parking areas should be provided at the rear or underground with access from public streets. There should be main entrances to buildings that face public streets, and setbacks, block patterns, and open spaces should be consistent with the character of the area. So as part of their application, they have applied to amend the official plan to go to a medium residential 2 designation, which is very similar to the density or medium density residential 1, except that it permits 150 to 300 units per hectare. And they've also proposed to increase the height to 4 to 7 stories. Some of the urban design policies in the secondary plan, it encourages that development create comfortable and interesting pedestrian environment. Again, that it respects the scale, design, and massing of neighboring buildings. That main entrances are provided along streets and windows. There's barrier-free access to any mixed-use commercial or residential buildings. And that new development minimize the impact on neighboring buildings through the appropriate transitions and scale. And finally, that parking should again be located to the rear or underground, be fully screened from view. So the existing zoning, it's site-specific S65 DE multiple dwellings zone. It's an older zone, and basically it permits only what's there today. So it permits the existing block townhouse development. So the applicant has applied to rezone the property to a DE2 multiple dwellings zone. I just want to also briefly mention there's the James Street North Mobility Hub study that was approved in September 2014, and it adopted by council to give some further planning direction due to the development of the West Harbor GO station and the future development of the A-line corridor along James. So it's been identified as a future mobility hubs. So some key recommendations from that study. There's a recommendation that the intersection of James and Strawn be improved to act as a future gateway to the neighborhood. That building heights should be mid-rise in scale along James, being no taller than the width of the right-of-way. That buildings along James Street North should frame the street, including by providing a front step back above the second or third story to create a consistent street wall. So the three questions I'm looking to get some feedback on today. First, does the proposal represent compatible integration with the surrounding area in terms of use, scale, form, and character? Secondly, does the proposal organize space in a logical manner through the design, placement, and construction of new buildings, streets, structures, and landscaping? And finally, does the proposal create pedestrian-oriented spaces that are safe, accessible, connected, and easy to navigate for people of all abilities? And that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
I think we could go to the consultant to provide additional information. And again, if you could limit your presentation to 10 minutes.
We're happy to do that. We are going to share a PowerPoint. Perfect. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Terry Johns. I am president of T. Johns Consulting, and we are the land use planners on this project. I have various members of the developers group and the design team with me that I'd like to take a moment to introduce. From the developers group, we have Frank Giannoni, president, Fred Serafero, senior vice president, and Anthony DeSanto. They are from Fram Schlocker. We also have Dan Gabriel, president of Mars Homes. Representing City Housing Hamilton, we have Sean Botham, development manager, as well as Graham Cubitt, director of projects and development of Indwell. Our project includes 3 architectural firms. Today they're represented by Emma Cubitt of Envisage, who is doing the Indwell building, Bill Curran of TCA, who's responsible for City Housing building, and Michael Afonso with Kirkor, who's taking care of the stacked townhouses. We also have, Mario Patitucci from Adesso, who is our landscape architect. With me from my team is Caitlin Gillis, planner, as well as Jennifer Badley, our planning technician. We're going to do our best today to keep to the 10 minutes. In doing so, we're going to highlight the site design and its relationship to the public and private realm. And we expect to and are happy to answer questions from the panel about the site design. To start, as background, the City Housing Hamilton RFP was awarded in July 2019. That was the start of the Jamesville team's public consultation efforts. Through that time, with various neighborhood associations and the public, we have had 8 public sessions. We are dealing with a very engaged neighborhood, and we're happy about that. We've worked closely with them, including 2 design charrettes, which the design team took into serious consideration, and it helped to inform the plan that's in front of you today. We have, Caitlin, can you go back 1 slide? Oh, thank you. Mark did a great job in giving us context. As planners, again, we like to have this sort of map in here to give everybody context for where Jamesville is in terms of walkability. It's a 5 to 10 minute walk from downtown. There's employment in the area, rec centers, and of course the West Harbor GO station. Next slide, please, Caitlin. Again, just to reiterate what Mark had given in terms of the photographs of the site, here's some context for you, very much showing parking areas were accessed from McNabb and Ferry, the townhouses that are existing front along the other streets. And then I'm going to go right into, I'm going to take a moment at a very high level to speak to our design principles. These were in fact used to inform the basis of our plan and the foundation for the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment. The first one I'd like to speak to is transition of building heights for neighborhood compatibility. Our plan provides lower heights predominantly along the local streets, being McNabb and Ferry. The 7-story heights have been centralized midpoint along James Street North. As I mentioned, our process has included many hours spent with the North End neighbors to understand their priorities, to make them work with our design. Height and respecting the more stable parts of the neighborhood were of importance, and we believe we have addressed that in our design. Secondly, safe and pedestrian-oriented traffic circulation, as well as green connections and a balanced public versus private realm. Jamesville Reimagined provides defined and landscape walkways throughout the site with public access. Vehicular access points have been limited to the higher functioning streets, being James and Strawn. Establishment of a gateway and node to the North End, along with integration and connectivity to the existing North End neighborhood. Key features of our design is the creation of public space at James and Strawn. This will function as a gateway to the north, as well as an opportunity for social gathering. Further along in our design, we also believe that our materials and colors will help to reflect our surroundings. Finally, transit-oriented development and housing affordability and socioeconomic diversity inclusiveness. Given the location to quality transit, opportunities are provided for walkability and active transportation. In terms of affordability, the plan provides for a range of densities and tenures. The development accommodates 166 social affordable units and 287 market affordable units. Offering both single and family dwelling units, Jamesville will deliver a mixed income community. And now I'd like to hand it over to Anthony DeSanto, and he's going to walk through the details of the design.
Kaylin, can you flip? All right, no, go back one to the master plan. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Terry. And what I'll do is I just wanted to take an opportunity to walk through this proposed plan in a little bit more detail. Terry highlighted some of the key design principles that really fostered the development of how we got to this point today. And I know Mark had sort of highlighted a few of the key numbers in terms of housing and built form, but what I'll do is I'll just summarize things in a little bit more detail and build on what Terry has sort of said here. So really what we're looking at is 3 different types of tenure and housing ownership types. As part of the RFP, the first building that will be developed will be Building A, which is a 7-story building for City Housing Hamilton. This is a building that will be designed to passive house standards and will look to achieve CMHC accessibility guidelines, where we have 21% of the units being barrier-free. This building is considered to be rent geared to income for the 46 units. The second component of affordability will be through Indwell, and that is the 7-story Building B as noted on the plan. This as well will be a passive house, highly energy efficient building. There's about 117 units currently projected in this building. The tenure for this building will be considered deeply affordable. And if there's any questions about that, the team from Indwell could certainly address that as we move through the Q&A period. The one other thing I wanted to mention about this building in terms of built form and addressing the street, we did look to incorporate some commercial retail opportunities at the ground floor, which will front James Street. The last component, which we consider to be market affordable, will be through the provision of the stacked townhouses. There are 14 blocks of stacked townhouses that surround this site. They range from 12 to 28 units. The stacked townhouses are a 4-unit module. So essentially what we're looking at is a lower level unit, which will be accessible through the rear, a main level unit, which would step up from the street, and then 2 units back to back, which are considered the upper level units. So these units generally will range from 2 to 3 bedrooms, approximately 950 to 1,000 sort of square feet. So that is the sort of the overall context. When we looked at this site, we wanted to ensure that we were addressing the stable neighborhood. We wanted to predominantly make the street frontages on McNabb and Ferry cohesive with the existing residential fabric. We wanted to make sure that there was an appropriate transition of heights. And as you can see, we've strategically located the 7-story height component to flank the main entrance to this street from James Street North. In terms of vehicular and pedestrian connections, this was also a really clear, important thing that we wanted to look at, and we did spend some time on it. As Terry had mentioned, right now, this site is accessible from Ferry Street and McNabb Street. There's 2 driveway entrances there and surface parking lots. What we wanted to do was we wanted to make the residential streets more of a pedestrian experience. We decided to pull the built form close to the street frontage to address the street. This also promotes sort of visibility and eyes on the streets. What we wanted to do from the vehicular standpoint is actually direct traffic to James Street and Strachan Street. This was sort of reviewed and vetted through our traffic impact study that was submitted as part of our proposal. Pedestrian connections are very important. What we wanted to do was achieve a clear spine through the central portion of the site. And if, I guess we can't really zoom in, but between 2 of the blocks central, we're envisioning a pedestrian muse. This will be sort of the central pedestrian connection that actually links McNabb Street through to the new condo road between buildings A and B, and actually connects to the existing Simcoe Street from James. This pedestrian muse, obviously located on private property, is envisioned to be a pop space, so something that would be public accessible. And really the vision for this was to actually draw people through the site. The way in which the site currently exists today, it almost creates sort of an island where it doesn't lend itself to clear pedestrian connections. It doesn't draw people through the site. By locating the vehicular access points on Strachan Street and James Street and allowing for the multiple connections, we really think this is a good opportunity to draw people through the site and foster more integration between what would be the new community and the existing fabric. So what I will do is I just want to take you through some of the detailed perspectives to sort of give some visualization to what we're showing here on plan. And maybe before I do that, actually, thank you, Caitlin, I'll highlight just sort of the corner plaza, which we call it at James and Strachan, and just provide some context behind this. Through the Pier 8 settlement, the other development occurring in the north end, there was a vision to have a clear gateway located at the corner of James and Strachan. There is a generous daylight triangle of 12 by 12 meters that will be dedicated to the city. Through our consultation with the public, we thought that it would be a great idea to actually further enhance this sort of corner of the site to really be that node and that gateway to the Jamesville neighborhood. This area is approximately 6,000 square feet, conceptual and design at this current point in time, but we envision this space to be sort of a place of social interaction, gathering, including places to sit, and obviously include some sort of shade structure. It also is an opportunity to have some sort of public art. This space, in terms of its ownership, is yet to be determined, but if it will be a private space, again, the vision for us is to make it a POPS. So it may be private, but publicly accessible for all. Caitlin, if you could change. So I'll just take you through some of the overall sort of perspectives. Obviously, this is the overarching view of the site. Just again, what I want to emphasize here is that we were looking to adhere to the existing neighborhood fabric on the existing residential streets. And there you see the 3-story stacked townhouse component and the transition of the 7-story to the central portion of the site. Switch, please. This is sort of looking at the main entrance from James Street North. Both of the built forms, being the 7-story components, frame this entrance. And when we looked at this entrance, we really wanted to focus it on being pedestrian friendly and incorporate traffic calming measures. So the vision here is to have lay-by parking, have bicycle parking as well, and probably do it something with a paver, something to signify slower traffic or traffic calming. One of the things that I want to emphasize about sort of the materiality of what you're seeing here in this image, and I will, I'll turn it to the architects later on in the Q&A to speak a little bit in greater detail. But one of the things we wanted to focus on was integration between the stacked townhouses and the 7-story affordable housing buildings. So as you can see here, the brick pattern and sort of colors being used in the 7-story inbuilt building is also consistent in the podium base being set by the CHH building. This same brick color and feature will also be used throughout the stacked townhouses. And this was really a goal to make it cohesive in nature.
Anthony, I just have to call attention to the time here, so I hope you're wrapping up.
Okay. How much time, sorry, is there left?
Well, you've gone over your time.
Okay, so maybe what I'll just skip to, if we could have just about 30 seconds, I want to just let Frank sort of address one of the key components related to market affordability. So maybe Frank, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Anthony. So one of the things that, how did we get to this form? When we were making the proposal, key part of the proposal was to replace the 46 units that were required by CHH in full cost, and then to provide an opportunity for expanding the affordable housing component. We did that by bringing Inwell, and our responsibility there is not to build the whole building, but to build at least the parking garage underneath the building, and then Inwell will handle the financing above. It's interesting how compatibility, and Terry talked about the compatibility before, compatibility and creating land value to allow us to create this affordable housing actually both fell in line. The highest value at that point in time was looking at the stacked townhouse form. And that's how we end up with something that's very compatible to the community. We're also ending up with townhouses that are going to range in 950 to 1,000 square feet. So you're going to be filling in a gap by what the existing community, how the existing community is regenerating itself, to how the condominium market, a little closer to downtown, is there. Condominium market is considerably going to be more expensive per square foot than what the stacked townhouses can be delivered at. So you're going to be getting 2 bedrooms and some 3 bedrooms that will fill a hole in the market there. Just wanted to pass that on about how compatibility worked to help us create the affordable home housing units.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you for your presentation. I'm going to turn it over to the first questions from the panelists, and the first person is Yana.
Thank you. Can you hear me? My video is turning on and off. I apologize. Yes. Okay, I have just 2 questions. Are there still residents living in the existing homes? And if so, is there any plan for the recent residents in regard to the possibility of staying in the area or coming back after the redevelopment?
Sean?
Sean, do you want to address that on behalf of CHH?
If you're speaking, you're on mute. I've driven by that site. It looks like it's boarded up for the most part.
So John's not able to speak. The property is fully vacant at this time, and City Housing Hamilton did have a full tenant relocation plan as part of that vacating process.
That's great. Thank you. And the other one was, there were drawings on the bottom of the package. It was the engineering drawings, grading plan, and so on, which were showing one block of the townhouses on the adjacent land, like Track and Street and Bay Street North, on that corner where is a little parkade right now. Could you speak to that? Is it still part of your proposal, or what is that?
So I will address that. As part of the original RFP that was issued in conjunction by the city and City Housing Hamilton, that parcel was part of the development proposal. At this point in time, there is no development application for that piece. That was simply there for representation purposes. The application at this time is solely for the larger site that we presented through the master plan.
Okay, and well, maybe a last question. I just can't get over that fact that it seems like such a lost opportunity to connect those two streets. And was there, I mean, Simcoe Street, west and east, and create a local road and better connectivity for these blocks. So was there any reason or, well, yeah, reason why did you not include that in your design?
So, and I think you're speaking about the Simcoe connection to McNabb, where we decided to make it more of a pedestrian connection through. Is that correct?
Oh, it seems like it's Simcoe Street East and Simcoe Street. Well, maybe you probably know the streets better than me, but it is in between the 7-story buildings, and then it continues with the pedestrian connection. But
yes,
it's kind of a very limited pedestrian connections in between those two stacked townhouses with stairs within it and a lot of other issues. Like I don't know how comfortable that is.
We're getting into commentary here. Let's. I
Okay.
guess the question
Okay,
is
you're right.
just.
You're right. Sorry. Yeah.
Was that opportunity explored, and if not, and obviously not pursued, can you elaborate on that in any sense?
Yeah, so I think when we looked at this, and I'm going to be honest with you, the iteration of this plan changed and developed further through our much consultation with the public. And at one point in time, we did potentially look at having almost 4 vehicular entrance points to this site. Creating traffic is also a concern for us. And we did not want to just make the street that would actually bisect this site as a way in which people would just be cutting through. We wanted to preserve the residential nature of McNabb and Ferry Street and really address that through the built form and focus it on a pedestrian connection. You know, from a street hierarchy standpoint, the collector and arterial roads are Strawn and James, and it made a lot of sense to actually push traffic out to those streets as opposed to putting it on the existing residential streets. And that was done through consultation with the community and sort of evolved as we went through our design process. Now, I will say that there is multiple pedestrian connections from McNabb and Ferry, but we've made a complete barrier-free, accessible, 10-foot wide pedestrian muse that will actually connect people through the site to the proposed condo road that will eventually connect to Simcoe on the other side of James Street.
Thank you.
Daniel? Dana, I should say.
I don't think Dana's here.
Hey, Joey?
Yeah. Thanks, David. I have a few questions. My first one is, was there a cultural heritage report developed for this project?
Yes, so as part of our OPA rezoning application, there was a document and salvage report that was required by the city, which was submitted. It was completed by ERA.
So just document and salvage, not heritage impact assessment?
No.
Okay. Okay. What were the findings of the document and salvage report?
Essentially based off of the analysis of the existing 91 vacant houses, there was nothing of significant cultural heritage or something or salvageable in those houses.
Okay. Do those reports require any kind of commentary on environmental value?
Sorry, did you say environmental?
Yes. Does the report ask about? I'm not familiar with the structure of the report, and the report wasn't made available to the panel for review. But is there anything in there that discusses outside of heritage value if there's any environmental value, the reuse of the existing material, of the lumber? I mean, the site's probably about 60, 70 years old.
What I will say is that as part of that, and it's not fully addressed through that report. We did have to complete a full substance survey of those existing units because there is significant asbestos throughout the entire units.
Right.
In terms of salvageability, the one thing that we have sort of looked at whether or not you could repurpose some of the bricks in some cases. But those existing 91 units need to be fully remediated in terms of abatement for the chemicals and asbestos.
Yeah. So there are chemicals, asbestos would have been around pipes, insulation around pipes, which would be
correct. Like there's a full
separate.
Designated substance survey that is completed as part of our process that in separate to the documentation and salvage report that is
Right.
part of the planning process. That substance study is not really part of that overall planning process.
Oh, okay, but that's different from the document and salvage report, though.
Correct.
Okay, so once the ACMs are cleared or their hazardous substances are cleared, there could be an opportunity to salvage a little bit more than the brick potentially.
Potentially.
Yeah. Okay. My other question was the proposal has just looking at the existing site. It has similarities in building form and mass and location to the existing site. I understand that a good portion of the site has underground parking, but was there an assessment or study undertaken that considered potentially the adaptive reuse of some of the existing vacant buildings?
In terms of reusing the existing structures for parking or building them into?
Yeah, not the ones that are sort of, I understand that the ones that are sitting above the new underground parking, it's impossible to do, but there's a good portion of the site that is at grade and could potentially have incorporated some of the existing structures.
So this is what I will say as it pertains to that. As part of our process, we had to complete a very detailed environmental assessment of the site in conjunction with the designated substance survey that was done for the existing 91 units. We went through an exercise of drilling over 30 boreholes throughout the entire site, and the site is extremely contaminated to the point where we're essentially digging out over 110 tons of contaminated soil that extends essentially lot line to lot line. So salvaging any of the built form currently in its existence would be next to impossible to satisfy Ministry of Environment regulation.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, Anthony.
I don't think Hoda's on the line, so.
Yes, I am.
Oh, you are. It's
Yeah.
invisible on my screen. Okay, Hoda, you're next.
Hi. Thank you for the presentation. I have a question about the access from the Starken Street West. Do you call it internal condo road? Is it the section that you call it in slide 34?
Caitlin, can we go to the slide just for context?
I think you call it internal condo road.
Yeah, so essentially what you're looking at here is the connection point from Strawn and James Street. Those internal roads will all be private condo roads. They will not be public roads.
Okay, yeah. My question is about that long access to the parking lot. I was just wondering, this road, what are the functions rather than taking people from the main street to the parking lot? Is there any, is it giving any service to the buildings at the left in the west, or it just going by to achieve the parking lot?
Yeah, so it also serves another function. So, we spoke about this briefly, but let me sort of reemphasize this, that parking for the site is provided through a combination of surface parking through the north half and an underground parking garage, which is one level. So one of the things we wanted to look at from an access standpoint is we wanted to tuck away that entrance to that garage off that main sort of road that comes into the site. So essentially that road also serves the purpose of actually getting to, and I can't really see it on this, but it might be block C, where the driveway entrance is to get to the below grade parking. So it also acts as a service road to access the below grade parking garage. It also will serve as a road to actually deal with waste removal. So the waste pickup for this site is also kind of tucked in at the back of building B. So that road serves, multiple purposes, obviously getting people to their surface parking lot and accessing their homes, but also directing them to the underground entrance point.
But nothing to do with the 3-story buildings on the left.
Well, so if you are living on the left in those 3-story buildings, you're sitting on top of an underground garage. You will access that underground garage from the driveway entrance on Block C. You will come out through various stairs that actually protrude up through or take you from that below grade compartment to access your stacked townhouse. Now, through the evolving design, there's potentially opportunities to have potential lay-by parking where that road might service as temporary visitor or pickup drop-off for a short period of time. And actually, you can see we've looked at incorporating a small section of that on the right-hand side. But through the involvement of that design, those are opportunities that we're going to be exploring.
Hoda, I'm going to have to ask you to, and generally I think we're going to have to go with much shorter answers and questions here, else we're not going to have any commentary time. So I'm going to have to ask the speed through the rest of the group. Okay. Jennifer Sison?
Thanks, David. So I just have 2 quick questions, hopefully. One of them is, in your streetscape concepts, you called the internal roads complete streets, but I didn't see any biking infrastructure. I was wondering if the intent for bikes is to share those internal roadways.
We flip to the section. So I think in terms of the condo roads, we'll have to take a closer look at, and I think you're speaking to incorporating like a bike lane on those private condo roads.
Or whether it would be like a shared.
I think it's a yes/no question, guys. We gotta speed up. Sorry.
Right now,
you're sharing the bikes with the roads, right?
Yes, at this point we are. We haven't advanced the design to this point to look at it closely. We have preliminary street sections that show it right now as being shared.
Okay, thank you. And my other was, I was a bit surprised that you didn't show the taller buildings facing Strawn in the open space north of the rail line, since that's kind of the closest location to the GO station. I was hoping you could talk about the intent of that, or whether it was just to reflect that future development is anticipated along James Street North.
It was in part to reflect the future development along James Street North. Also, there was an effort to keep both of those buildings outside the underground structure, and the underground structure encompasses the south portion of the site.
Okay, thank you.
Jennifer Mallon.
Thanks, David. Quick question. I'm wondering how far you are along the process of design and approvals. I see this as a rezoning application, but the documentation seems pretty far along. And I ask this because I'm wondering about the value of and breadth of our commentary. You've gone through 8 public sessions and 2 design charrettes, but so where does our commentary have impact?
We made a OPA rezoning submission. We've received preliminary comments from the city. We have not received the city's comments as it relates to planning or urban design. I think that the intention was to come to this panel to get further comments, feedback in conjunction with the cities for something for us to think about and include. And maybe there's some things that we aren't thinking about at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Elton?
I'm sorry, just trying to figure out the mute button. Just 2 really quick questions. One, the space between the townhouse blocks, the active faces, could you confirm what that distance is?
You're in terms of the separation distance between the built form?
Yes.
I believe the internal, if we could go to the master plan, I think there's a 8-meter separation between the sides, between the middle. I don't know if there's a dimension there. Caitlin, do we have it handy?
I think it's about 13 meters, but I'll have to.
And it's 7.5 to 8 between some of the sides, between block H and K, for example.
Okay, yeah, it was more about the active faces as opposed to the side faces. I was just curious about that depth. So about 13 meters?
I believe, Eldon, but we can circle back and confirm that. by the end of the
Michael,
presentation if we
Michael, can
continue
you
forward.
confirm that?
I think it might be around 12.5 meters.
Thank you.
Okay, and my other question, and just out of curiosity, you mentioned you've gone through 2 design tracks. I'm sorry I missed it if anyone may have asked this, but I'm curious why you didn't include that history and chronology of, I guess, evolution as part of your package.
Sorry.
Sorry, it definitely was part of our planning justification report, of course, in terms of public consultation strategy. I apologize that it wasn't part of this.
Oh, don't apologize. It was just, it was interesting to know that there was a lot of consultation. It would have helped us in our evaluation before coming to this meeting. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Do you have any questions?
Yeah, one is I suspect there was a lot of discussion about the location of the park. One option could be to have it at the north end of the site on that corner and create a gateway through a different fashion. Was that something that was considered?
I think when we looked at this site from a strategic standpoint and also building on the much work that went through the settlement of Pier 8, it was envisioned that the corner of James and Strachan would be the gateway. And we looked to build on that in conjunction to what the community had worked on there.
Okay, thank you. And the other question I have is at a very high level, we understand that the 2 buildings, I believe, are meant to be passive house. What are the commitments from a sustainable perspective that the rest of this development is making beyond code and requirements?
So I guess building A and B are going to be designed to, high energy standards in terms of passive house. In terms of overall sustainability, we're going to be looking to do things with rainwater reuse for irrigation. We're also exploring different opportunities with the stacked townhouses. For example, we've built quite a few Energy Star houses. We're doing the first Energy Star building here in Port Credit. So we are exploring other energy efficiency methods that can be employed on the stacked townhouses. We're just not there yet in our detailed design process.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll hold my questions in order to have more commentary. And so I turn to the panel. Jana, if you could provide feedback and recommendations.
Thank you. Thank you, David. And thank you for your presentation. I'll try to be short, but it's difficult with this one. I don't see any issue with the additional height and density. To me, it makes sense so close to the GO station. And I think that the proposed height increase is not offensive to the surrounding area. I think that the site has a great potential. I would strongly suggest to focus on the design of the site. I know it's probably too late in the game, but I really would like for you to focus on redesign of the site to better reflect the patterns in this neighborhood, creating a development which is well connected with the existing neighborhood, and design the site layout with a more thoughtful approach to its surroundings, to the existing urban fabric and various typologies, not just the same boxes of stacked towns, but a variety of housing forms. I would focus on better addressing the street. Some of the proposed blocks have a very problematic relationship with the street, with the flanking conditions, with sunken units, a lot of stairs. In regard to connectivity, it just seems like really such a lost opportunity not to connect the public streets with an actual local road, to create the blocks which would better reflect the neighborhood structure and the existing blocks in the neighborhood. In my opinion, stacked townhouses with sunken units are not the best solution for this area, at least not that many of them. I don't see the compatibility of this form as was suggested. And furthermore, the altered grading, which is needed to allow for these sunken units to be considered basement units under the code, this creates enormous barriers throughout the site in regard to accessibility and lots of stairs. And it really creates, I know it's not shown on the renderings, and I wouldn't expect that because it's really much later in the design when these things starts to appear. But it does create so many issues in regard to the relationship with the public realm and connectivity and accessibility. And I would really strongly suggest to revisit this type for your project and at the minimum, introduce more types of townhouses and apartment forms and better siting of the future buildings. I think there is opportunity to create better city blocks, which have a potential to become a community rather than just stacking the same building boxes on the site. And I think it's a large site, it can provide a better fit, more options, more varied build forms and massing. The large parking in the middle should definitely be eliminated. If needed, maybe a few visitor parking spaces here and there could be proposed, but generally I would suggest to use most of this area for self-scaping. And the last comment I have on the 7-story buildings, I think they should be designed maybe with a little bit more interest, but at least with much better street presence and openness toward the public realm, at least at the ground level. That's all for me, David. Thank you.
Joey.
Thanks, David. And thanks to everyone for your presentation. I just want to start by reiterating and emphasizing what Jana raised about the connectivity to the neighborhood. This is a major development that is going to have a major impact to the neighborhood. I think it's highly commendable that you met with the community to discuss what their needs are. But I think something was lost between what the residents needed and actually what the neighborhood needs. I see the project as a kind of criticism to past and bad planning principles. And this is a very good example of block busting, which happened 50, 60 years ago. But it seems that that's not being addressed here. And the major, and I really think it's just one major issue, is extending Simcoe from James back to McNabb and really kind of bringing the scale of that block back to its sort of rightful place for the residents and for the larger neighborhood. So I think that's hugely important. So there's a discussion about, not wanting to cut through, but that's exactly what you want to do, because then you have an insulated neighborhood and something that is not connected to the larger sort of context and to the larger neighborhood. The other note I want to make is on, Ted asked about the sustainability commitments. I think there's an opportunity here to salvage and reuse material that is, I think, maybe 60, 70 years old. So I think there should be, in addition to kind of considering the brick, there should be significantly more salvage done here. Maybe all of the brick and maybe a significant part of the lightwood frame lumber as well. I'm assuming that the majority of buildings are lightwood frame. And that is it for me. Thank you.
Oda.
Yes, I would like to thank you for the presentation and the good try that you had in designing this project to have pedestrian-friendly design. I appreciate that. I have some comments on that. First of all, about the Simcoe access at two sides of the site. I was thinking that the picture of residents and neighborhood about the access to this site used to be from west. I understand that you wanted to encourage traffic to take it more away from McNabb and encourage them to access to the site from James Street. But I was thinking that this memory of people, how they access the site, and along all the years that has passed, we can't just change it right away and expect that people likes the site and understand it easily. That's the important point to when we are changing the neighborhood. We are trying to improve, of course, but of course we are trying to mold and encourage what they used to have and what they used to and like it. And another point is about the public space. I suggest the public space that it's at the corner. It's very nice located, but it needs to be more connected visually to the rest of the pedestrian accesses to the site. It's not that much welcoming to the site. It's nicely sitting at the street to encourage people who are passing away to stop by, but not for the residents to encourage them to come in and welcome them. And also, I think it's nice to be connected to the entrance of the building A and B. Of course, there are more about the open spaces along the side, especially the parking lot. I echo my colleague Yana that this parking lot could be nicely divided in small pieces all along the side, not only on one spot. That's all my suggestions. Thank you.
Jennifer Mallard.
Thanks, David. I'm echoing some of my colleagues' comments. I agree with Joey's comment about the super block approach and lessons learned from, certainly Regent Park here in Toronto, where creating cul-de-sacs or large parking lots that are isolated from through traffic, it is a model that we are now replacing because it's led to further social problems. So we can see at the cover page of your presentation, the granularity of the neighborhood closer to the water is a much smaller block module. And I agree with my colleagues that have said that breaking that block module down by providing through traffic and smaller pods of parking, as Hoda just said, I think will lead to a more socially sustainable neighborhood. If the gathering space is on the corner, then that's fine. But I think there's a funny shift in scale of public space, so that if that's the public corner, then it goes immediately to the stacked towns, which are quite private in their nature. And I think if there was a transition of that public space leading to maybe the street that you've got running in the middle, or to the taller buildings where there is more public activity at grade, I think there's a scale of public interaction that should be looked at. That's all for me.
Eldon?
Thanks, everyone. Sorry about the camera. I've been having problems this afternoon with this platform. I do echo a lot of my fellow panel's comments. I do want to acknowledge and commend this team for, first, this project being affordable housing, and second, looking at a passive house design as part of the overall plan. I think those are all admirable and fantastic objectives for this proposal. And I agree, like in terms of overall form and transition, this proposal, at least for some of my colleagues, this proposal fits, and it's not offensive from a built form perspective. However, I do think that internally and spatially, it does seem quite condensed. The reference to, or the space between the townhomes, whether they are 12 meters or they're larger, for 4-story townhomes, that's very narrow. It's a pretty tight space. If there is an ability to create a little bit more breathing room, whether it's a shifting of those densities to the apartment component, I think that would help to provide more quality accessible space at the ground floor, and assisting with privacy and overlook, and ensuring there's a little more individuality of the buildings themselves. I recognize that obviously your unit, maintaining a certain unit count is important, and obviously affordable housing is important as well. So it's a balancing act, and but it shouldn't, trying to attain those units shouldn't be the priority over ensuring that the space in which people live in is compromised as a result. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Did I skip Jennifer Sison?
That's okay.
Sorry. Two
So
Jennifers in a row.
Yeah.
Apologize.
No worries. So hopefully, without repeating what's already been said, I do agree with a lot of the other panel members and the points they've made. I do want to say I appreciate the provision of the affordable housing, including the missing middle elements with the stacked townhomes, as well as the passive house sustainable units. And I think that the reduction in car parking makes sense with the proximity to the GO and bus stations and the walkability to downtown that Terry touched on in her presentation. But with that said, the surface parking is, of course, not really ideal. And while many of your spaces are already underground, I wonder if all or more of those spaces could be pushed underground to free up some more of your at-grade space to allow you a bit more separation between the buildings, as others have touched on, a little bit more space and a little bit more amenity between them. In terms of the built form, I also find that the relationship to the existing kind of residential around is a bit lacking in sensitive transition, particularly on James Street, where we have, you know, the side of a townhome block and some taller buildings fronting onto the road without a lot in terms of step back to reduce their impact on that street and the neighboring residents. I do think you've done a really good job and want to compliment you on the streetscape concepts and the corner plaza. Obviously, a lot of thought has gone into this design, but I do think a bit more emphasis is needed in the built form surrounding the plaza to help really establish this as a gateway. And a final concern I have is the internal courtyards and the sidewalks. To me, they appear to be very narrow and they just meet the minimum requirement for accessibility. I think passive surveillance is probably going to be a bit of a concern in these areas, and you may not have enough of that to make these courtyards feel safe. The separation between units, if increased, could help with this and also provide a bit more privacy. Overall, thank you. I'm very excited about this opportunity, and you've incorporated a lot of great elements.
Ted.
Great, thank you. And compliments to the team. I do think this is overall going to be a very positive contribution to this community. Just want to start by talking about the public space. There's a park that's going to be a positive amenity. Wondering if we could see more of that public space somehow integrated lightly throughout the site. The corner at the north end is an opportunity to also create a public space opportunity. Can the spaces that transition through this block, north and south, east and west on axis, feel more public? They currently have a kind of ambiguous public-private space, which is not encouraging for people to pass through this space. And one would hope that this would become a much more porous block. The streets passing east-west, understand the desire not to have traffic coming through there, but the linkage to the west is very private feeling, and it should, at the very least, could be pedestrianized, but should take up the scale of the street and welcome the residents to pass through that site. Would like to see a little more variety in the blocks and the massing, a little more surprise and delight within that space. It's very rigorous, which we appreciate from a cost perspective and constructability, but I think there could be more moments, architectural and urban. Can commercial be integrated to a greater extent and more accessibly on the east? The character, I'd like to talk about the character of the architecture, and I understand it's preliminary. The low rises seem to have a good quality scale that relates to its neighborhoods in a residential context. We'll really like the rooftop amenities that are on some. Would like to understand or see why they couldn't be on all of those spaces. The taller towers, the architectural expression, I feel should be revisited. Appreciating Passive House has limitations on projections and other issues. I think there is a lot of work that could potentially be done to reduce the scale, to make those more possibly contemporary in their expression, and a little more relatable to the other, the lower scale buildings. Agree that the internal spaces are too tight, and wondering if some of the setbacks from the street could be reduced to have more backyard space than front yard space. And would like to see on the return of this review detailed description of how this project, which is a great opportunity for this community, has a much more robust, sustainable story beyond the two buildings achieving passive house. How is that overall on the site surpassing expectations and delivering great value for the city? Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. So in wrap up, I'm not sure I have anything new to add. I think we've covered a lot of bases. I would say that in terms of the three questions that we were asked about the compatible use, scale, form, and character, I think in general, I think the scale of the components and how they, transition into the surrounding neighborhood and the 7-story towers are probably fine. If anything, I am sympathetic to the argument that Eldon made that maybe you could alleviate some of the perhaps too dense footprint of the site and add another tower closer to the park at the southeast corner there, and alleviate some of the tightness of the site in general that you have. I think I also agree with the idea of trying to reintroduce Simcoe Street or introduce Simcoe Street through the site in as much form as you can. Perhaps, as Ted was saying, if it's only a pedestrian realm, it does look like the fabric of the city has continued through there. I think that the issues about the character of the two taller buildings, I think there is underdeveloped compared to the townhouses in character, and I think it does. I would just be repeating a lot of what Ted is saying, and particularly I find the ground relationships and the opportunity along James Street for, I guess it's Block A, to be a bit under not convincing, not really taking advantage of the opportunity of that that more arterial street and the nature of the possibility of that area. Otherwise, I think most of what I said, I'm very in line with what Jana was saying at the very beginning. So I won't bother to repeat it, and we are beyond our time limit here. So again, we look forward to seeing how this develops, and hopefully some of the suggestions that the team has made here, or the panel has been made, will be incorporated in your thinking in the future. The other comment I would say is this is a very big project with basically three separate architects, and we're kind of reviewing it in a single meeting. It's hard to really get into the details and some of the things to give the project its proper due. It's such a complicated project, and we had to cut your presentation short, and I think we're really kind of clipping our own feedback. There was some odd things about building B in terms of the internal organization, with it looks like one elevator on each side of a building that's split in half. It seems that the level of functionality there seems a little mysterious, and I guess I would be interested in having a more fulsome explanation of it, but we really don't have the time, unfortunately, to do it. So anyway, well, part of that is a comment to the city, is maybe this project warrants a longer period of time, given its complexity compared to some of the other things that we're viewing within the same period of time. But again, thank you. Lots of hard work, and good luck with this project. I think whatever you do is going to be better than what's there right now.
Well, thank you. On that note, we actually thank you very much for your time today and your comments. And it is a large project, but we're excited to see the changes. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for their time.
Thank you.